David Ian
Cool.
Howe, how are
Yeah,
you?
man. Good, man. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. So,
Big fan of the channel, by the way.
well, I'm a big fan of your work as well.
Thanks.
You are the man on dogs. You are the guy.
Yeah.
You're
I
the dude.
I get asked questions quite a bit about dogs, and I answer them as much as best I can.
I'm sure you do. So your handle on Instagram is ethnosynology.
You got it.
Yeah. So what is
Yeah.
ethnosynology exactly?
Yeah, so it's the study of dogs in human cultural contexts would be the best definition. But like ethno people, sino is dog. So like joining those two together.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are there many ethnosynologists?
Just me and I guess technically Dr. Angela Perry, who does all like the genetics research on dogs and stuff like that.
Nice.
I'd say
Okay.
she's like the leading expert in academia right now. Yeah.
There are not many then. Not many. That's interesting.
No. Yeah, it falls under zoology or anthropology, however you want to go about it. And then there's like a lot of dog psychology out there too, but um in terms of archaeology, yeah, this is ethnocynology is it.
Dog psychology. I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Have you ever bridged dog psychology into archaeology?
Mm, kind of. I guess you could stretch it and say like understanding how dogs work psychologically and how they operate and like reward versus risk benefits and stuff like that. You can apply that to domestication and dog evolution in the past.
Nice.
So it can inform that, but in the sense of psychologically evaluating a dead dog, I have not done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Yep.
studied archaeology.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at what point did you branch out into dogs?
Um, I mean, I always loved dogs. It was never something I wanted to study, but I don't know really what did it. There's a million things, but I remember watching a History Channel documentary called Mankind, the Story of All of Us, and it was narrated by Josh Brolin. And like the first 10 minutes is like humans in the Ice Age, and they talk about or humans in Africa and then the Ice Age in Europe. And like within 10 minutes, they're like, oh yeah, and then dogs, exist. And then they went on to the Bronze Age. And I was like, well, go back. Like I wanna learn about that. And then I went to school for that because I was already in archaeology and stone tools, paleo people in North America. And then I went to grad school specifically to like learn more about, prehistoric dogs.
Everybody loves dogs. I mean, everybody that I know loves dogs anyway.
Yeah, right. And some people are afraid of dogs, I've found, but like they still at least have an interest in them because they're around.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't met someone who outwardly is like, I don't like dogs. Like I've yet
Yeah.
to meet that person.
Yeah, I suppose it does happen, but that's yeah, if they've been attacked by a dog or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, cool
Oh,
man.
yeah, man.
Dog burials in the Paleolithic.
Yeah.
You come across many of these?
I've never dug up a Paleolithic site in Europe. I've not done archaeology in Europe. There are no dogs here until about 10,000 that we know of in the Americas till 10,000 years ago. So nothing in the Paleolithic per se. But yeah, the Paleolithic burials like overseas, especially in like Siberia, the like Baikal area, are pretty like extraordinary. They're just buried really well. A lot of them in Scandinavia too, and there's a few in Germany that I know of, and I think the Netherlands.
And
But
these were like beloved clan members, right?
you can debate that.
Mm.
I would agree with you. Yeah, like I guess the debate is whether it's a wolf or a dog because you really can't tell with just the skeletons, especially that far back. But my interpretation would be if humans cared enough to bury a lupine like creature in a burial that ornately or with other people, therefore it had some significance or like they revered it in some sense. So I would agree. Yeah, and that seems to be pretty cross-cultural in the Paleolithic. There's some places where they're just thrown into like midden piles as if they were like being eaten or just, discarded like any other refuse.
Yeah.
But and that's really common around the world too. But yeah, the ornate burials in Paleolithic Europe and Asia are pretty cool.
And then sometimes you get humans thrown into middens. So I don't
Yeah,
know what that's about.
seen a lot of that too. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
like
just
gotta
chuck them out
throw
there,
them somewhere.
basically. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so these dogs that are buried in these ornate ways. Do we know how they died?
Um, I'm trying to think of a specific example.
Mm,
The ones that I know of, sometimes they're in their prime when they've died. They're not like too old of a dog. They don't have any like wear and tear on them that bad yet. Which could indicate like it was a sacrificial thing.
yeah.
Or that, it got gored by a boar or something, or a rhino, whatever they were hunting.
And that wouldn't
Um,
have much impact on the body, I guess.
if it just hit their like bloodstream, like just a flesh wound, but like if they bled out or something, you wouldn't be able to see that. Or if they stabbed it in the heart or something and it didn't nick the ribs, you wouldn't know. There are dogs that are completely just like their ribs are broken, their spines are damaged, and things like that. Probably a village dog had a hard life. Hunting dogs, clearly get gored by boars a lot. I
Or a
think this one,
mammoth.
or yeah, or a mammoth at the time, which is wild to me that dogs existed while people were still hunting mammoths. Pretty
Yeah.
cool. My dream find would be to find a dog just like, shish kebabbed onto a mammoth tusk.
Wow.
But not gonna find that. I could have rode out of the permafrost any day. But yeah, man, sacrificial, or it was just that the dog died and they put it to rest and it was a good hunting dog and they revered it in that sense. Or
A particularly good dog.
yeah, or that they loved it and it was a family dog. They just put, that we can't tell, but we can assume.
So dogs first arrived in the Americas 10,000 years ago, more or less.
Uh, the first evidence we have of them
First
is
evidence.
that old.
Yeah.
I would assume they arrived, like you can tell genetically, they should have arrived with Clovis people around that time. We just haven't found evidence of them yet, which finding a dog at a site is very difficult, especially if they like are kicked and get away from the mammoth we're cutting up.
Yeah.
You're not just gonna find a dog bone there. But yeah, I would presume because dogs are domesticated in East Asia about 15,000 years ago. So that time is when people are start entering the Americas. You can see them being traded across all of Eurasia into Africa and Europe. And they right at that split go into the Americas as well.
Interesting.
So
That was going to be my
yeah.
next question. So,
Okay.
first evidence of dogs in the Americas, what, 8,000 BCE, more or less?
BCE, yeah, 8,000.
But first people in the Americas evidence is quite a bit before that.
Yeah, if we want to go with like the standard agreed upon date, I think Clovis is around 13,000 something.
Yeah.
In Alaska, we can easily say 15,000 years ago, people are there. There's other pre-Clovis states that are getting pushed back now, though
Hmm.
some of them I don't find to be too compelling.
White Sands, do you find that compelling or?
Yeah, White Sands I'm quite familiar with. The dating seems fine. I'm very interested to know like what those footprints looked like before they scooped them out. Because I think a lot of people see it like they look at that and it's like a stain in the ground that was scooped out in the shape of footprints. They just think it's footprints, but really what that was is a bunch of staining in the ground that the archaeologists presumed were footprints and scooped them like the stains out in that form. And then some of them have like six toes, which is odd,
Oh.
which is just a result of them scooping it out. But I would think it's a sloth because there's other sloth footprints at White Sands that are that old or older.
Not, not aliens?
Um, definitely not aliens that I know of, but we could find that out. I'm more of a pessimist on White Sands than other people are. I'm sure most people probably agree that it's old, but my thing with pre-Clovis is it's always something like that, or it's like a tiny little flake that you have to like read a whole article on like why it is a flake or why it's a human-made tool. Whereas when you see a Clovis site, it's a very distinct like, okay, this is a tool industry. These people are doing this. You can see how they're living.
Yeah.
Pre-Clovis is always odd in that sense, but I'm open to it. And so along those lines, I would expect to see with an established Paleolithic culture in the Americas like Clovis. I guess it's more Mesolithic than Paleolithic, but you would see more dogs with them. Like you'd see evidence of it because they left so much other evidence, but we don't see that yet. So that's another thing that like I'm kind of like a pessimist on pre-Clovis, but at the same time I'm like they had dogs and like there's no evidence of it yet either. So but genetically we should see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I always had the image of humans pretty much side by side with dogs almost since the beginning, really. So crossing over the Bering Strait with dogs. That was always
Yeah.
the idea I had. But it's interesting to think that there was a time when humans didn't have dogs in the Paleolithic. And are you saying 15,000 BC, more or less domestication?
20,000
23,000.
years before the present, whatever that is in BCE. I can't
18,000,
remember.
something like that.
Okay,
Interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Siberia.
Yeah, that's where it seems to East Asia, Siberia.
Mm.
Um, and that's, I guess your follow-up question would be why.
Mm.
Uh, it just seems that humans, like once you get to out of Africa into Eurasia and we're all established as modern humans or whatever, uh, wolves and humans ate a lot of caribou in that area.
Okay.
And there were certain glaciating events that like kind of isolated people into that area. So they were kind of forced with little movement to like get along with dogs or get along with wolves, and wolves had to get along with people in that sense. So it was not to say adapt or die to the wolves, but like when there's this other super invasive apex predator in the area killing everything, um, or at least killing what they are efficiently, the wolves kind of have to adapt. And it's kind of like dogs to me just won Darwinism. Like they don't have to do anything. Like a cat can still go out on its own and hunt. Like some dogs, I don't think know how. They like to tear things up and stuff like that. It's in their instinct. But a Chihuahua doesn't have to do anything to survive. It's just fed every day. Um, and wolves initially probably figured out like, okay, these big apes here with pointy rocks and fire have a lot of scraps they leave. We can just go hunt that, eat that, and if we don't bite them, they'll give us more, kind of thing. And whatever interpretation, if humans were killing the wolves and the nicer ones stayed around, that's one theory. If the wolves are doing it themselves and it's self-selected, that's another theory. If humans were going out there to pick, wolves out of dens like puppies, ones that and then raise them to be, kinder on humans, that's another theory too, and that would be artificial selection. But yeah, it all seems to point to genetically and archaeologically in Siberia, which
Yeah,
is pretty
interesting.
cool.
So one of my questions was going to be, I mean, was it did dogs domesticate themselves? I know there's this idea that cats kind of they did it themselves. It wasn't really the humans who actually made the first move. So who made the first move?
Yeah, if I ramble, just let me know too, by the way. But
No, ramble away,
yeah,
ramble away.
cool. I can talk about this for hours, but yeah, that's kind of thing. I think a lot of people like to just have kind of like with the what we were talking about before with Brogan and Dibble. People like to have a predetermined like here's how it is, or they want an answer to it. The Younger Dryas is a good answer to why everything died and the Ice Age ended. Uh, in my opinion, it's a majority of competing factors, um, or myriad of computed factors. But in terms of dogs, yeah, it's anyone's guess without a time machine. It's just some form of natural selection with wolves like self-selecting for, don't bite the humans, they won't hurt us kind of thing. Because that's technically would be natural selection in the sense that there's something they're doing on their own and they're adapting to a new species that's there, a new environment. That's what evolution is. Or is it humans selecting and killing the ones that are too aggressive, in which case that would be human selection, artificial selection. I think it's a mix of both, but I would argue it was an inevitable coalition or what do you call it? Coevolution together. But yeah, I would say it's more that dogs did it themselves than humans did it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes a lot of
yeah.
sense, to be honest. I mean, humans were doing pretty well.
Yeah, especially if you're thriving in Siberia at that time, you're doing something right.
So, like, there would have been lots of spare meat probably if you kill a mammoth. Just
Yeah. And
a
I,
lot of
I
meat
don't
on
know
those guys.
for sure, and it could last you months
Mm.
probably. Plus all the utility and the skin, the hides, the fur,
It must have been a big
the bone.
spectacle on the landscape, a mammoth kill. That's got to be a big, big thing happening, attracting a lot of scavengers, maybe.
Yeah, and that's something for anyone that has seen my channel or wants to see it, I have a video on a bone needle we found in Wyoming. And it's an Ice Age Clovis or Folsom bone needle, Paleo-Indian bone needle, and it's at a mammoth kill site, and they're using, it was like fox bone and cat bone to like sew up the mammoth hides and whatnot. But it seems like this site, we know they had like red ochre at the site that's from like at least a 2 weeks walk away that they had to mine from somewhere else, so they brought it with them. It looks like there's a bunch of groups at this site fully butchering the mammoth together, possibly like teaching each other stone tool stuff or, just sharing culture. But yeah, like this site in Wyoming at 13,000 years old is like this cool aggregation site where you can tell other hunter-gatherer groups were coming together to either hunt it together, butcher it together, or just take part in whatever ceremony went on. So my question there too is like, well, without dogs, how are they keeping the saber-toothed cats away? How are they doing, especially if they're cooking it and smoking it?
Yeah.
That's a world that I like without a dog, I can't fathom, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
someone's just on alert the whole time. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I love this idea of a gathering event, different clans coming together, meeting for a hunt, maybe
Right.
having some sort of religious event, possibly. Maybe there was a shaman there, or am I just getting
Yeah.
ahead of myself?
No, I'm right there with you, man. Like I think that's probably the case. And
Yeah,
we found a big, huge stain of red ochre in the ground, as if it like spilled onto the ground.
yeah.
But they probably were dyeing the hides with it or like painting their bodies with it or something. But I've never seen that much red ochre at a site before. So I would imagine there's some ceremonial thing going on.
I shouldn't say it, but ritual?
Yeah, yeah. Just file it under ritual.
Yeah.
Yeah. But transposing that to the old world, like a big mammoth kill like that will probably was a spectacle, would have attracted wolves and dogs, and that's probably what, brought it
Mm,
about.
like a feeding frenzy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting, interesting. I love that period of history because humans are still animals,
Yeah.
the big top apex predators, but still, I mean, we're animals now, obviously, but we
Right,
like to
right.
think that we've escaped from that kind of world. But, at that point, just a couple of animals cooperating,
Yeah.
hanging out, hunting together.
It's pretty wild. And I said this in my lecture too, but if an alien were to come to our planet and like kind of document what's going on, especially like let's say like 10,000 years ago, document what's going on. The biggest thing they would write, obviously humans inhabiting almost every continent but Antarctica at the time, but like the fact that there's a wolf with them that just walks around and like hangs out it has to be the weirdest thing to see. And it'd be like Coco the gorilla talking to a fox, like it's just such a weird
Yeah. Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about like fish that clean the algae off bigger fish and things like
Oh,
this. I mean,
remora fish.
it's
Yeah.
not quite the same, but it's interesting how some animals do cooperate with each other. I was reading the other
Yeah.
day about octopi. Apparently, they cooperate with fish to hunt. And
Really
yeah, okay, well, it's been observed anyway. I don't know if it's happening all the time, but they will sort of cooperate together and go on hunting missions. Crazy,
interesting.
crazy
I know
stuff.
that. Yeah, cephalopods
Nature,
are like
weird.
so smart and creepy.
Oh yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah.
nature is weird. Yeah.
Octopi. I like an octopi. They're basically aliens.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, like the way they operate, how intelligent they are,
Pretty
how
alien to
different they
us.
are from everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was my next question going to be? How did we end up with a pug? I mean, that's a pretty strange looking animal.
Yeah. It is my best answer would be if you think about all the dogs in like that Victorian era of just like breeding tiny little things and like let's just go wild with it. Because every dog before then had some kind of function, either as a scavenger around human society or hunting or basset hounds kind of thing like that. But like or a collie, but those are still relatively recent. Pugs are a definite example of like we want this animal to look as human as possible. And it has a flat face, big eyes, a smaller nose, and it just looks like a human. That's like what they're trying to do with it. And like the little Frenchies too, they look more human than anything. And
That's
domestication
really
syndrome.
interesting.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Was
really
that?
interesting. I've never thought
Yeah.
about them looking like a human before.
Yeah. I mean, domestication in general is taking a wild, robust animal and making it more gracile. or docile. So if you think of like aurochs or like the ancient cow, they're dead now, but they had big horns. Cows, their horns are gone, but you bred some have bred them back to have more horns. Ox to bulls. Um, but like goats and ibex, sheep and mouflon, that's all just like a more babied version of itself
Like a
that
docile,
stays.
easy to control version of the wild.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that it's called neoteny is the scientific term, but like when you look at a baby or a puppy and you get that feeling of like like that's what that is. And you want to protect that sheep better or that puppy better because it looks cuter. And more cute means less aggressive. So that just got bred into them, and it seems to be a scientific phenomena too, that it's not just selected for, it just happens. Like their ears will flop, their tails will wag more. That was the Siberian fox experiment, figured that out too. But in terms of pugs, it's like they're taking that domestication syndrome and just like multiplying it into like a human-like animal that like can barely breathe. So yeah.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
these animals are being naturally selected because they are cuter, almost.
Uh yes. Like it's a side effect of breeding animals in captivity makes them more gracile and docile in that sense. Yeah, and you see it with
Interesting.
all domestic animals.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. So it just happens with sheep and cows, and it's not a humans are not selectively breeding them necessarily.
How did I phrase it? Like a wild ibex or like a wild aurochs back in the day, they had dogs like help corral them into some kind of pen or something. Or without dogs, they did it somehow. But like once those are in captivity and being bred, and like kept in that area, they start to show those signs. It seems to be the case. So a good example to put it into perspective, the Siberian fox experiment was Dmitry Belyaev, and he took silver foxes and bred aggressive ones with aggressive ones and more docile ones with docile ones. And he'd like stick his hand in the cage, and if they bit at it, he'd call it aggressive or whatever. Um, Over time, the aggressive ones just got more responsive to people, like aggressive and didn't want anything to do with them or would bite them. And then the docile ones started to get like their tails would wag. They'd be more happy to see people. They got spotted coats, their ears flop down. And it just seems like the more you select for kindness, the more juvenile they look. Like, because fox puppies look like that. Their coats change color, but it stays with them as they get older. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a combination of factors.
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah. Very
And much like selecting for seeds that were bigger and tasted better, which turned into corn or wheat, I think the same thing happened with them. It's like, oh, these cows are cuter, and therefore they'll give us more food later on or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah. And they'll be
yeah,
easier to control.
yes, mainly.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. We probably shouldn't talk about this, but where do cats come in?
Oh, I see why. Um, yeah, I would love to learn more about cats as much
Yeah.
as I could. I joke that I don't like them, but I do. Um,
I think everybody loves cats as well, deep down.
yeah.
People will say
Uh,
they're a dog person, but they'll still. I think we like cats as humans. I think there's something in dogs and cats that I think just humans intrinsically are drawn to. I don't know what it is.
yeah.
I don't know if that's just me being woo woo, but
No, no, I think you're
in the
right.
human
Like
condition somewhere.
cats much like dogs are apex carnivores in
Mm.
their in carnivora, in that like that order. Like we're primates in the order primates, but um carnivorians, like we have every other animal we have domesticated is an ungulate or a rabbit or like guinea pigs or something, or fowl. But like the only domestic predators we have are dogs and cats, and it's because to be an effective social predator, you have to be social. And dogs and wolves quickly, or wolves and dogs quickly picked up on human social cues. And you can talk to each other with, food being the language. With cats, it just seems like, and it's interesting, there's not a lot of like written research on this that I've noticed. Like it just is kind of presumed, but they just appear around agricultural settlements where humans have more excess grain, which attracts more rats, and then cats want to come eat that. So It's debated are they domesticated or not. I'd say like with the Sphinx cat that's hairless or like the Siamese cat, like they're clearly bred to look that way. But like an African wildcat looks just like a house cat. It's just a little more feral. And
Mm.
cats, when they leave the house, can immediately just go hunt and live on their own for years pretty well. Like they completely destroyed Australia's ecosystem,
Yeah.
but like they're pretty efficient at it. But
Pretty
there's other
much
factors
every
there too.
ecosystem that humans, every island that humans have ever gone to, right? Cats come in and just wreck everything.
I'm not sure about every island, but the ones that I know of, yeah, it
Yeah.
seems to be the
I
case.
think it was
Um,
the Pacific Islands when Cook got there. I think that eventually some cats got there and they sort of just messed everything up.
that would make sense. Yeah, and that's funny too, because a lot of people think Cook brought rats to Polynesia, but they actually the Polynesians brought rats with them
Oh,
everywhere because they
yeah, yeah,
hung
yeah.
out on the boats too. Um, but
And they
yeah, then
took
he
dogs
got
with
there.
them as well.
They did. In fact, I'm making a video on this, but every time Cook went to, I can get back to cats, went to a new island in Polynesia, they offered him a dog, and he was like, "I don't want why." And uh, then after like a while, because it's so interesting, he had such like an open mind in many ways, but other ways it was very narrow because of the time.
Yeah.
But he was like, "I guess I'll try the dog," and then he ate it, and it must be a delicacy. And he's like, "It's pretty good," and then he just kept eating the dogs. Uh, but they wouldn't give the chickens or pigs because they needed those for food. But dogs was like more of a please have this kind of thing. Um, and then he couldn't figure out why they kept stealing out of his boat. It's like, well, when you show up on shore, they can pick what they want.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with cats, it's like they just seem to appear around human settlements. They're eating the rats, and they just like I think meowing, I've heard this anecdotally, is more only done around people. They don't really do it with themselves in the wild. So it's like they just can exploit human sociality and do the cute puppy dog kitty face to us and we'll feed them and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The meow sometimes sounds like a baby crying.
Yeah, I guess you could argue that. I
I
I
don't
never
know
really
if
thought
they,
about that.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing that anyone talks about, but it's something I've noticed myself. But I don't know.
Hmm.
Cats are, did they did they do that by design to get humans to feed them?
It's a good question for the comments.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, I do know like most domestication books, like they'll mention dogs as the main one, and then all the agricultural stuff and horses. Cats are just never mentioned.
Cats are later than dogs then.
Yeah, cats are probably 10,000, 8,000 years later.
Cats is an interesting one. Yeah. So there's a good argument that they're not actually domesticated, right? Or maybe there's not a good
Uh,
argument, but there's an argument.
Yeah, that would be my argument. I joked about it in my lecture that I have on my YouTube, and this guy from the New York Times emailed me and was like, "Hey, I loved the lecture, blah blah," and then like sent me a bunch of stuff. He's like, "I have written articles though on why cats are domesticated," and like
Yeah.
sent me like three links, and I was like, "Oh wow, okay." Uh, people don't cat people don't like being told that, which is funny. But yeah, I don't know. Like they seem, I think on paper they're domesticated, but they're not like there's no diversity in cats like there is like Chihuahuas and Great Danes to me. So I think that's what throws me off. But genetically and archaeologically, they do seem to be domesticated.
It seems
Yeah.
like just on the face of it, they haven't fully given themselves to humans, but probably genetically they have. I mean, do we
Yeah.
know, can we see the differences in DNA from sort of wild ancestral cats and modern cats?
I would be talking out of my ass if I gave you a proper answer on that, but
We'll move back
I
to
do
dogs in a minute.
believe I've read on that yes, like you can. So there's a PBS Eons video on cat domestication that I think kind of answers that. I just can't recall what it was in there because I'm a
Nice.
dog guy. But
But what about, let's move back to dogs. What about
yeah, yeah.
dogs? Can you tell the difference between modern DNA of dogs and ancestral DNA? Like, is there and genetics, is there like a difference? Or is
Um,
it more like skeletal?
yeah. I've never heard someone say that the British accent.
Skeletal.
That's skeletal. There you go.
I don't
Where are
think
you
I've ever said it
from in
before.
Britain, by the way?
I'm from Birmingham, and
Okay.
I live in Nottingham, so I'm very much Midlands, the Kingdom of
Okay.
Mercia.
I know like the Yorkshire accent versus London, but in the middle, I'm like kind of
So we
can
border
never pin it.
Yorkshire is above us.
Okay.
You've got Yorkshire, Nottinghamshire, and then the south.
Okay. Gotcha. I try to pick it out more, but all right, cool. I like your accent, by the way.
A lot of
We'll
people
see.
call me Ewan McGregor for some reason. That's a weird comment.
That's what it is, because you're not Sean Bean.
It's not
He's too
Sean
much
Bean,
north. But you're
bastard.
yeah. That's really good.
For some reason,
Oh.
it's the negotiations were long, Master. Oh no, that's not even a
Master
quote.
Cypher Diaz. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
But yeah, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
hell yeah. I like that. So skeletally, yeah, you can see dogs. That's why it's such a debate as to when they're domesticated, because a dog's a dog is just a subspecies of the wolf, arguably the same species. So evolution's not Pokemon. Like you don't give something a stone or like level 34 and it evolves, you know? Um, and I just
Moonstone.
a moonstone, there you go, which you can only find in Mount Moon, two of them in the whole game. Um, yeah, so I think, especially for people our age, like Pokemon did kind of obscure evolution in that sense because it
Oh yeah,
seems so quick.
yeah.
Uh, and then for people who didn't play Pokemon, they don't aren't familiar with evolution at all, unless they learned it in school. But with that in mind, like it takes something a long time to change into a new species. So and like you have to find like an old one and then a new one to see like what to do. So with dogs, overnight you're not going to tell. So like a Chihuahua now, or even a village dog 4,000 years ago, will look different than a wolf 20,000 years ago for sure. But like a husky or a big German Shepherd, they do look like a wolf, except for their face has that, neotness. It's more scrunched to look like a puppy than it is like with the wolf. So you can see that evidenced a long time ago. Like is it a wolf? Is it a dog? And it starts to gradually change into dogs for the most part for history look like the dingo, just a standard yellow wolf-like looking dog. Um, and I'm getting away from what your original question was.
So
Oh,
we can go back to my original question. I
yeah,
was going to ask you about what dogs looked like for most of history. These
yeah,
German Shepherds and things like this, have they re-evolved to look like a wolf? At one point, did they look like a dingo and now they've gone back to a wolf, or have they always looked more or less what they look like now?
yeah. Like the default coat color for a dog is dingo colored for some reason.
Okay,
That like when you
interesting.
look at their genes, that's the case.
Interesting.
Um, so like the wolf-like gray seems to be like an Arctic or not Arctic, but subarctic tundra thing. And then that goes away because if you look at village dogs in India or Africa, they're kind of just tan, like
Yeah.
dingo color. Maybe not as golden as dingoes, but they're like tan. They look like that for most of history, especially Amerindian dogs. And then like there's some white in there too. But like with a German Shepherd, yeah, it's like it was taken from a shepherd-like dog and then made to look more like a wolf to intimidate sheep and or well other wolves and things like that coming to attack the sheep. The big Tibetan Mastiffs and stuff like that are bigger than wolves in some senses. There's big Mongolian dogs too, because they want to breed them to look at that. And then a husky or a Malamute kind of has just retained that Arctic canine feature into now. And Greenland dogs, I think, still have the most amount of Amerindian DNA that wasn't replaced. And they're a good example of what dogs probably looked like way back in time.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
yeah,
So they could be like an example of what a Paleolithic dog might have looked like.
yeah, I would argue that.
And
Um,
have they stayed more or less the same throughout history?
I don't know exactly if that's the case, but I'd imagine so. If anything, they're like, I guess my reservation would be like they might be a little more robust
Mm.
now because they're bred for pulling sleds.
Ah, okay.
But that color and that, keeping because Inuit cultures and Inuk, Mi'kmaq, anyone in like Canada, Alaska area, and probably Siberia as well, that had sled dogs, like sled dogs just stayed outside all night. Like they weren't ever let inside. Only one was usually allowed in, and they
They're
were
going to
just like
grow some
tools.
long hair pretty quickly. If that's the case.
Yeah, it's like their way of living out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, the question you had that I went on a rant about Pokemon, I forget what that was, but can you see it skeletally? Yeah, or
Yes.
genetically? Yeah. So over time, you do then start to see a distinct, this is dog DNA versus wolf DNA. which is, when you do your dog's 23andMe or whatever that thing is that
Yeah.
dogs do, the Bark Lab or something.
Bark
Um,
Club. Nice.
I don't know what it's called, but you can see like, okay, I have a black lab versus a wolf, but if you were to like do, if you're an alien scanning barcodes on species, you'd see like rat, eel, dog, and wolf would be the same thing. Like it's just, you know, the same animal. Eel's not probably
Interesting.
the best example to give, but you know what I mean. Um,
Yeah. So
yeah,
there's not much difference between a dog and a wolf.
not really. The only thing I have it on this camera here, but here's a dog skull. A wolf skull wouldn't have this curve here. I'll show it to the camera. It has like it's more flat like that. It goes straight down, and that's just that like scrunching it in to look more like a puppy. So even wolf puppies have a skull like that, but it eventually grows longer as they get older. With dogs, that doesn't grow out. It stays puppy-like. But when you look at it skeletally, you would think that's a different species than, the wolf if it was an adult dog that looked like this versus a wolf skull. I need to get a wolf skull. Um,
Yeah,
but
nice.
it really is like the same thing as just there's just cells. It's called neural crest cells, and when you're in utero, those don't express when you're a domestic animal. Like they don't, your face doesn't grow up, but it should. Everything like if that makes sense. So it's like just
That
a
makes sense. Yeah.
phenotypical thing, just like their ears flopping down. But like with a shepherd, they're bred to have their ears back up and whatnot. So,
Oh, that's another good word. Phenotypical. What does that mean?
so phenotype, I can't, I don't know what the Webster's definition would be, but like phenotype is like visible characteristics that aren't genetic. Um,
Ah, okay.
so something that affects you later on that's not like, exactly coded into your body. Let me double check that. Just want to be sure.
So I mean that's a
Um,
humans can have this as well.
phenotype refers to the observable characteristics or traits of an organism, including its physical appearance, development, and behavior. Yeah, so like your behavior can isn't genetically determined. That can change, but it does influence it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, okay, so we've got dingoes basically all over the world throughout
Mhm.
most of history. At what point do humans start changing? I mean, so they're dingo-like. Is that because they're like a jack of all trades? They do a bit of everything.
It's a good question. The way I would phrase it is like the dingo is a village dog type thing that followed humans down to Australia and eventually, just got in a boat, came with humans at some point. But Aboriginal people had been there forever,
Mm.
or 50,000 years or so. Dingoes genetically about 10,000 years should appear. I think the earliest dingo remains are about 4,000 years old. But the dingo, as an example of that question, gets to a continent where there's no other apex predator like that besides the thylacine, which is a little smaller and more slender. So this wolf-like creature that's a little more, domesticated gets there, has an entire continent of kangaroos to just go wild and hunt, and it reverts back to that wolf-like state or like a feral dog, and that's what a dingo is,
Yeah. Yeah.
and has the ability to do that. So the dingo and the New Guinea singing dog, in that sense, they look similar. Um, are like what like a default dog mode would
Mm.
be in like their genes. So like and the Amerindian dogs from the Spanish and French accounts seem to look the same, but they're all gone now.
Oh, they're all gone. All of the Amerindian dogs are gone.
Yeah, there's a lot of so Greenland dogs are the have the most old DNA, and then Chihuahuas and Charlotte Squintleys have obviously like Amerindian DNA in them, but they've been so muddled by European and Asian dog DNA after colonization that like essentially like the Chihuahua was bred, it's so diluted, but it's kept its Chihuahua phenotype, if that makes sense, or its Chihuahua shape, but
Yeah.
it has European DNA.
So
Um,
even the dogs will colonize us.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there with that too, because it's like I don't think the Spanish got off their boats and were like, kill all the dogs, or they weren't
No,
like
no, no, no.
have sex with all these dogs, well, have their dogs have sex with the other dogs. But
Well, to be fair to them,
yeah,
they didn't
yeah,
get off the boats and say, "Let's kill all the natives." It's just what happened.
what happened? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you imagine like the Spanish meeting the Taino in, Jamaica or the Bahamas, and they had dogs, you can't stop the Spanish mastiffs from like sneaking off. And yeah, so it wasn't like,
These are big
it's just
war
interesting.
dogs.
Yeah, big war dogs. Either eating those dogs, but I just meant, in
Well, I
having
mean,
intercourse with them.
they ate enough people, so they were probably eating the dogs too.
That's a good point. I don't know any.
It
I
was
might look into
certainly
that. It's a good question.
good old Christopher Columbus had a thing for feeding people to dogs.
What's his name too? De Gama? No, not De Gama. That's a different guy. The guy who went through most of the southeastern United States. De Soto. That was
DeSoto.
like that was
Yes.
his thing. He was
That was
like,
his
yeah,
thing too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It worked. I mean,
But
what is scarier than being eaten by a dog? Like
pretty bad.
yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And I mean,
Yeah.
considering the Native Americans had dingo-like dogs, they wouldn't have
Mhm.
seen these European ones before. So it's like a monster.
Yeah, it's a good point too. I didn't even think about that. It's just something
Horrendous,
completely different.
horrendous monster. I mean, it doesn't even look like a dog to them.
Yeah, because the dogs in Mexico were the hairless, toothless, like, or some teeth were missing.
Yeah.
The Charolais Quintleys, and they weren't bred for war. They were like
No.
sacrificial
Yeah.
family dogs and stuff. But Cortez for sure had war dogs at the siege of Tenochtitlan, and like they had armor and like everything, which is like it must have been crazy because
Yeah.
they never had dogs for that.
Imagine a dog in armor.
It's one of those things where it's like the context of it is rough, but it's another like I see a dog in armor, I will probably will say hell yeah, like it's kind of cool
Yeah.
looking, but like the context is not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Don't worry, I'll make a clip of that out of context and
there you go. Put that on my profile.
yeah.
But Plains tribes here, like in Wyoming and Nebraska and Kansas, they and the Dakotas and Montana had dogs that were bred for pulling, like travois is what they're called. So like the two poles on the back. And they would interbreed them with wolves to be stronger, and they'd like file their teeth down, which is also crazy to
So
me.
they were what, like
So,
pulling little carts?
it's like since they didn't have the wheel, they had like it's like two poles they tie to the back, and the poles with you've probably seen native images of like horses with them too,
Mm.
but it's like two big long poles that just drag behind the animal, and they can tie like with netting, like
Yeah.
bags and stuff to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But dogs use that forever. And then when the horse came around, they were like, "Oh, we'll just do that." And
Do that
like a
instead.
lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
cultures called the horses big dogs for that reason because they'd never seen
Oh,
it,
interesting.
or big
Yeah.
deer.
Horses, late comers,
Yeah,
many thousands of years later.
super fascinating. And they're from here too, so they just immediately took over the environment just fine because that's where they're from.
Yeah,
Um,
horses were in the Americas like hundreds of thousands of years ago, right?
yeah, they died out.
They
Like
died
people
out. Yeah.
hunted them here when they got here, and then they died out from whatever the climate change, the overhunting, whatever you want to say.
The late
Um,
Pleistocene megafauna extinction event.
Yep, there you go. We'll call it that.
Is that
Uh,
do you subscribe to that?
I don't know if it was the comet. I know that's or the meteor. I think
Yeah,
that's
no,
the
no,
big
no.
pseudoscience one.
I'm
Oh,
not talking about the comet. I just mean I think there's the idea that as soon as humans arrived, we kind of just killed everything.
yeah.
That is that an
th-
old view, or is that?
It's old and it's also like being. I see some people still doing it. I subscribe to it's a combination of everything,
Yeah,
but it does
usually
seem
is.
when humans appear somewhere, all the animals die. It's like
Yeah,
New Zealand, Australia,
yeah.
Madagascar.
Yeah. Like
Um,
wildly different times in history as well, separated by thousands of years.
Yeah, so it wasn't just the Ice Age that killed them all.
Yeah.
And it like
Yeah.
Cuba had big ground sloths too until 4,000 years ago when the Taino got there and then they all died. So it's just like uh it is interesting, but I think what the confusion is people think that humans like hunted down every single last mammoth and killed them like it
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
an army.
Yeah.
But really it's just like it takes 22 months to grow a mammoth in the uterus. So it's like, what's it, gestation to gestate a mammoth. So if you're killing the bulls and the population can't recover and the climate's drastically changing, it's not going to help.
And
But
ecosystems tend to be quite fragile when you're taking out a massive food source.
exactly,
Yeah.
with smaller animals moving further north and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my take. And then the other thing too with that is if humans did bring dogs into the Americas with them at that time before everything went extinct, you then have this really efficient way of you're protected at night. You can bark when there's saber-toothed cats coming up or whatever. You can watch how the dogs hunt something before you do it to know it's safe or how they'd go about it. Watch wolves do it. But another thing is interesting too is like not that rabies was a thing, we don't know that, but if humans and wolves came into this continent that hadn't seen humans or like domestic wolves before from the other side of the world, what if they had some kind of disease that and that spread quickly with dogs hunting other animals and things? I don't know, but that's something to think about too, like as another factor as to why everything died.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, disease is something that has been spoken about more recently in kind of like the end of the Neolithic in Europe, for example. And this kind
Okay.
of, there's an idea that if there's a big population change, like a new group comes in, the old group seems to mostly die out. That doesn't happen out of nowhere. So there may have
Yeah,
been disease going on.
that's a really good point. The
Interesting.
paper is called Man's Best Friend, Mammoth's Worst Enemy, if anyone wants to read it. But he does propose like with some computer modeling how it could happen.
Mm.
Um, would I like to see a mammoth with rabies? Kind of. But I'd
Can you imagine?
be kind of a scary thought. But or something like that, you know.
That's a good film that needs to be made. Rabid mammoth,
That'd be so sick.
like
And it has like a vendetta against the group.
like a prehistoric cocaine bear.
Yes, I was trying to think of that. That's a good one. Some movie like that. Yeah, or Sharknado. Um,
Sharknado. Oh yeah.
Cocaine Bear is crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
I got away from your question there, but yeah, Amerindian dogs replaced by like I don't think it was a prescribed thing by the Pope to do it. It just happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then yeah, the Plains tribes had the like the oh right, the intermixing of like wolf dogs and stuff. So there were different dogs for different tasks all over the place in the Americas too, but just like the old world. Yeah.
So there were different dogs for different tasks in pre-Columbian times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is when agriculture begins, I suppose. They get put into like specific roles.
Yeah, I'd imagine like a lot more dogs get spread around with agriculture, like when maize comes out of Central America
Yeah.
into North America. But I know like the Iroquoian tribes in New York and Canada had dogs. They had like dog sacrifices. They had like it's part of their mythology and their creation story has dogs in it. See, like the Southwest, they definitely had dogs, and like there's a lot of coyote mythology too, and intermixing with coyotes. Mexico had a distinct multiple types of dogs, but there was like a lot of ritual purposes. The plains had dogs for pulling things. And then in the southeast, with your agriculture question there, like especially in Tennessee, or St. Louis or not St. Louis, Missouri, anything along the Mississippi River where the Mississippian cultures kind of sprung out of, there's a lot of dogs, like just buried in midden piles, eaten. A lot of, I think the most dog burials in the world or in the Americas come from Vancouver Island, if I'm not mistaken, but there's I'd say equal amount in the southeast from what I've read. They're just all over the place. And now it's like dogs might be considered part of like you can't dig up indigenous burials here because of laws and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But dogs are now included in that too because they're buried with reverence and stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
So I can't put pictures of like a dog burial for like spiritual purposes and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is it's cool because I as much as I'd like to post the pictures and talk about it, it's like I also would argue that dogs are that, intrinsic to native society, so I would respect it. Um, but yeah, they're just everywhere. Like every site has a dog in the southeast. It's great, and they were used for food. They were used for hunting and for they'd wear backpacks and stuff. Yeah,
Interesting. They'd wear backpacks.
yeah, they like to carry like
Wow. I love it.
stone or water or shellfish and
Oh, that's
stuff when
cool.
they're collecting them.
In the outskirts of Cahokia, I know that there was one outlying settlement where the people living there were not elites, let's say, and I think their
Okay.
diets were mostly dog, and
Oh,
they were quite,
cool.
and they were quite not doing very well, let's say, and they were a bit malnourished, and basically, it's the idea is all they had to eat was dogs, and then like a little bit of scraps and things like this.
Yeah,
I find that interesting because it's not all
I know
dogs
nothing
are
about that. That's cool.
not all dogs are revered. some
Yeah.
some of them are just food.
Yeah. No, I think for most of history, that's kind of how they were
Mm.
seen. And it's just like they do have the utilitarian purposes of like hunting, helping with that, but they're also in every survival movie, they eat the dog or the horse first
Yeah,
before each other.
yeah.
So,
It seems like
um,
there's a hierarchy of dogs almost. Like sometimes you could get a dog that was revered. Is that would that be
mhm.
fair to say? Or
I think it's circumstantial.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it does seem like it's both in most places in the world. For instance, with I want to say it's the Inuk. Their mythology, like I said, that their sled dogs stayed outside and they couldn't eat anything but like fish because it would be offensive to caribou or moose or whale for dogs to chew on their bones because they're traitors to animals.
Oh,
Um, but in that society, they'd let one dog in the I want to say it's an igloo, but that's more like way Inuit. It's a type of snow dwelling like that. They'd let one dog in the house, and that dog was given a name, and therefore it was a word of the soul with that sense. But the rest of the dogs are outside just eating fish in the snow. Um, so it's like even in that society, there's like a utilitarian dog that's like just a tool, but then there's the family dog inside. So it's just circumstantial. Um, and in Polynesia as well, like they're eaten quite a bit, but they're also utilitarian and family animals at the same time. So
so interesting.
yeah,
So you'd have one dog that's got a name.
in that society, yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
I'd imagine that's common.
everyone else is outside.
Yeah, and it's kind of the way we have, like we care about our dog more than anything. But if another dog, like a, I should say, if another dog gets hit by a car, you don't care. You do care, but it's just like if you saw it, but
Yeah.
like you're like, oh, that sucks. But yeah, um,
I'm just thinking, I mean, yeah, there are certain societies where you would get an occasional dog, like a family dog, in an elite society, like a king's dog, which is
mhm.
much more revered than all of his subjects.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
So I don't know if that maybe occasionally that would happen in the Americas. I don't know. In the Aztecs and things, I don't know, like Montezuma's dog.
That's a good point too. I never really thought about that because like the Moctezuma's dog would probably have way more social status than the slave caste in Tenochtitlan. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
point.
That's good. That's a lucky
Um,
dog.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, Montezuma had a or Moctezuma had a zoo in his palace, like a menagerie. It's super
Yes.
cool.
I love this. Yeah,
Um, super cool city.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, what would have been in there? Dogs,
Uh,
lots of birds,
Jaguars,
jaguars.
birds, probably like an aardvark or what? Not aardvark. What are those things called?
Yeah,
A
there's
tapir. Yeah,
tapir. Yeah, yeah. There's some wild animals in Mexico, like some really cool ones. Like the
yeah.
tapir is super interesting. Yeah.
Turkeys, things like
Mm,
that. Yeah, which turkey comes from Mexico. I always forget about that. It seems
yeah.
like a Pilgrims and Indians kind of dish, but it's Mexican.
Yeah. So,
And
so turkeys were native to the Americas then. Is that right?
yeah, the southwestern tribes or cultures domesticated turkeys as well as the Mexicans.
Mm.
Um, but they kind of just turkeys are wild turkeys live all over the U.S., but the domestic kind that come from there have just invaded all over.
That's a good
Yeah.
animal to domesticate. There's quite a lot of meat on a turkey.
Yeah, and that's why it's interesting that there's not a lot of turkey in like Mexican food. It's like from there, at least
Yeah.
that I know of. When I learned that, I did make turkey with like avocado and
Yeah.
like tomatoes just to see if it tasted, and I was like, it tastes fine. But but yeah,
Nice.
turkeys, llamas, and then guinea pigs are like the other. And the guinea pigs are domesticated like rabbits are. Like you just keep them in little cages, and but they were eaten in I want to say Peru.
Yeah, that's
Um,
definitely Peru. I'd love it if there were guinea pigs and llamas in Moctezuma's menagerie, but I don't know if
I'd
he. I
hope
think. I think.
so.
I'd hope so. I would hope so. It's quite a
Because they had
distance.
potatoes from and tomatoes come from South America too. Or no, they
Yeah.
come from
Yeah. Yeah.
Central. So,
Yeah.
um,
Potatoes traveled quite a long distance.
yeah. I'd say like not to get sappy on potatoes, but like they fundamentally changed the course of like human history and population as like much as like horses or dogs have in a way. It's just like
Big time. Yeah.
that all comes from the Americas. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Absolutely.
cool.
A lot of people would associate the potato with Ireland, but they only arrived in Ireland in what 1500s, 1600s.
Yeah.
Before that, what did we have? Turnips. Not much else.
Apples too, I learned. I thought those were like a medieval year because I played Stronghold as a kid. So like
Yeah.
you had apple orchards. I was like, oh, they're English, and then I realized they're from like China.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know that very early apples were in kind of like the Kazakhstan area.
Oh
I
wow,
don't know if
okay.
that's where they came from originally, but Yeah, we're talking thousands of years ago. But then they didn't arrive into Europe until much later.
Interesting.
The Romans were quite the movers of goods. So like a lot of things came with the Romans.
That would make sense. Yeah,
They
with
liked
their roads and everything.
yeah, rabbits and things like this. The Romans moved around.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Okay. Because I associate Roman food with like fish probably more than fish and bread.
Yeah,
But I
there
guess
was
they had hardtack and cheese and stuff too. Yeah.
yeah, it's a strange diet. They'd have a lot of like fish sauce, just
Like garum, right?
fish
Yeah.
sauce on everything. Yeah.
Um, has anyone ever asked you questions on these podcasts yet?
Not yet, not yet.
I was gonna ask you like what I should just have you on my show, but like what got you into this and like you're like prolific YouTuber by the way. So
Thanks, man.
yeah.
What got me into it? Well, I've always been fascinated by history for as
Yeah.
long as I can remember. So I studied it at uni and then finished uni, did my masters, finished that.
Oh, cool.
Basically, just wanted to go out into the world, do a bit of traveling, see the world a bit. And then it was always my idea to eventually go back and do a PhD. But
Yeah, same.
here I am instead.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Because
I started writing about history and it was just one thing led to another and then
right.
started making videos from them at some point. It's kind
That's
of,
exactly what happened with me. Yeah.
that's what happened to you as well. Yeah, but what are you doing your PhD?
No, not yet.
No,
I'd like to at some
you'd like
point.
to. Yeah, yeah,
Um, I'm doing what I want to do with it now,
yeah.
so I just don't need to do another 4 years. But
Yeah,
the title would be cool.
I'm in the same boat. I've toyed with it for the last 5, 6 years, to be honest. I keep thinking, oh, no, I'll do it next year. I'll do it next year. But
I know I'll get bored or sick of YouTube enough at one point to just be like, all right, I'm gonna go do this.
yeah,
And just for another challenge. But yeah, man, because your videos are so like long, I'd say, but like just well researched and like the way you narrate it, and it's just like I've fallen asleep to many of them, I should say. But it's like
nice.
the way like I can just tell you like sit there with a script that's really well researched and like yeah, it's a lot of work. I don't think people realize how much work, especially
So,
what you're doing.
yeah, it's a lot of work, but that's the side of it that I love. So I absolutely, the
Okay.
research, by far the best bit.
Yeah.
When I'm stuck in, I've got 10 books on the go. I've got my tablet filled with articles, reading through them. That's heaven. Then comes the writing, which is the writing is good. I like the writing. Then comes the editing, which is less good. And
Hmm.
then comes the turning it into a video, which is probably the worst bit. But then it's done and it's out there. And then I can
Right.
start on the next research bit. So it's always the research that keeps me going because I'm always wanting to go on to the next project.
Yeah.
So I'll get stuck in a video for like a month working on it. And it's like a war zone.
Yeah.
And I'm just working on it like from when I wake up to when I go to sleep every day. And I try and change
That's
my environment. Like sometimes I'll go work in a coffee shop, sometimes I'm at home, sometimes I'm wherever. I'll try and change
yeah.
my environment. Just I'm always doing these tricks to try and like be able to be more productive. But yeah, it's hard work. But the best bit and the thing that keeps me going is the research because
Yeah.
it's just human history. It's the greatest thing. It's the greatest thing we have. The fact that we have so much information is just incredible. Like people don't
It is
necessarily
wild.
think about it, but we are in a golden age of information. We have more information than anyone has ever had ever, and that's pretty awesome. I love that.
Yeah. I know what you mean, man. Like yeah, it's insane how much info we have at our fingertips at any moment. Like even as a kid, I couldn't like just look up something that quick. I had to wait for the dial-up to work and all that.
We actually had
But yeah,
the encyclopedia books. So
yeah,
I'm
I
old
had a
enough. I mean,
bunch of
I
those.
was born in 1990, so we had like in the
Okay.
90s the actual books. So I would spend hours just all right. Let's look at C. All right, what's under that? And
Yeah,
be like, okay, let's look at K, and
yeah.
just go through the list.
Kings,
Yeah, yeah,
kangaroos. Yeah.
exactly. Like so
I'm
cool.
92. So yeah, right there with you. But yeah, man, the research part, it's like I read something or I have something, especially with dogs that I want to talk about, and then I'll read it and I'm like, that's so cool. Like cook 8 dogs, what? And then like I want to like write a video on that, but then I got to get like a bunch of other sources and like, how do I frame this as a video? And it's like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work,
But
but
the
it's
research
rewarding.
is the cool part.
It's rewarding.
Yeah, man. Well, I didn't mean to take over your podcast by asking you questions, but um,
No, no. We can maybe
um,
just finish on.
yeah,
I've mentioned the Bronze Age. Um, so at this time in the Bronze Age, when like you could say kings are becoming a thing, cities are becoming a thing, agriculture, settled civilization. In Eurasia, what was happening with dogs? I mean, is it similar to the Americas? Like, are there many different types of dogs filling different niches?
that's a wonderful question that I have no answer to. Like I kind of
Nice.
my knowledge kind of ends at the Neolithic and then picks up again at like with Rome and Greece.
So let's talk
Um,
about the Neolithic then.
yeah, I mean, I'd love to put a pin in that and learn more about it. I'll go back to you. But yeah, the Neolithic, I guess by extent into the Bronze Age would be just like people are now in more settled, like, they're not moving around the landscape. They're not hunter-gatherers anymore with dogs doing hunting. So dogs then help protect livestock. They help, herd livestock. There's specific people that are hunting and stuff now with dogs, and you can see this skeletally, however you said it,
Skeletal.
skeletally being bred for, division of labor. Like there's more specialized breeds at this time, and you do see that in China, the Mediterranean, the Levant. A lot of it comes from the Levant actually, because I mean just a lot of archaeology there.
Mm.
And then it's same thing mirrored in the Americas, like the Neolithic with Mississippians. It spreads all over.
So there are sheepdogs. Would that be a
Yeah,
thing?
to my understanding, and this could just be my theory, but it just makes educated guess sense that if dog is the first domestic animal, and then like you have goats, sheep, pigs, cows all being domesticated at the same time, dogs have to be helping with that because
Dogs are helping with the looking after the animals, and yeah.
that and you're hacking their brains into thinking they're being attacked by a wolf, and like how a herd moves when it's being attacked by a wolf. So then they'd exploit that and use dogs to like move them into pens and things like that.
Oh, that's so
So
interesting. So there's an argument maybe that domestication of cows, pigs, goats, things like this maybe wouldn't have happened without dogs.
it would be hard for me to argue against that
Hmm.
because it seems like anywhere where they had domesticated livestock like that, dogs were there.
Yeah.
So it was helping, or they at least knew how herds moved when they were being attacked by a wolf or a jackal or something, and exploited those movements because people are so in tune with nature at the time. Um, I don't know if that helps with the llama or the alpaca. I'll have to look that up to prove that theory. That's a good thing to put a pin in as well. But in the Near East, it seems like because there's an abundance of dogs there at the time, that would be what they're doing. Or if that didn't happen, they at least had dogs there to, once they were herded and domesticated, to keep them in line like we do now, you know? So, and to answer your Bronze Age question, it's that just times 10. I'd
Yeah.
probably, yeah,
Yeah.
with more,
I mean, to be honest, Bronze Age and Neolithic are fairly similar in some ways. They're
just
both
different tools.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's like the agricultural base is there. Yeah, and
Hmm.
just the tools are different. And then it's like redistribution of power is kind of what happens.
Yeah.
Neolithic is possibly sometimes a bit egalitarian, and then by the Bronze Age, it's sort of not.
Troy is considered Bronze Age time, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's dogs in the Iliad, so that'd be a good for
Yes.
something to look at as well.
Yes. So there'd be, I mean, these sheepdogs, would they be the same as hunting dogs? Or would there be
Mm.
specific hunting dogs bred like for the elites, like
Sheepdogs
in
like
the Iliad?
shepherds, you mean?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess what a shepherd is, shepherd. Um, yeah, I think I know I had an answer to this like that is factual, but right now it'd just be me talking out of my ass. But like, yes, they were specialized for certain things. You can see more robust dogs and like more gracile ones and things like that, which would indicate there's different types of dogs at the time. So I'd imagine they'd be doing different tasks. And you do see, especially like in more state level society, dogs get a lot more abuse because they're being kicked and things like that.
Oh,
Um, but it is also hard to determine, they're being hurt by a boar or a cow or something that just stomped it when it was hurting versus a human.
yeah.
Um, but you do see like, yeah, specialization at that time. And Flint and I talked about this, which one of his big things he likes to talk about is the dog at this one of the sites he worked at. And you can see evidence of people feeding dogs scraps in like Greek pottery and things like that, and like at parties and stuff. So there were family dogs, there were working dogs, and then like you can see that all skeletally. Yeah.
So it's a mix. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. What about who's the Egyptian, the dog-headed god? Is Anubis a dog-headed god?
Uh, Anubis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Anubis. Yeah.
There you go.
So what's that about? Why is he dog-headed? I mean, is this wild speculation?
So this is one I have researched thoroughly.
Okay, nice.
Was he a dog? Is he a jackal? Is he a fox? This one paper came out saying that he just is a canid, like in general.
Okay,
And this is interesting in terms of dog mythology and dog all that. Like Anubis is there's a million things I can say here, but he Anubis is the first god you meet when you die, and he like takes you to meet the other gods. He like preps you for it,
yeah,
and then he puts your heart on the scale or whatever. But it's interesting that a dog-like creature, whatever you want to call it, this paper I read said he's just an amalgamation, but this dog-like creature judges your character when you die. So it's a that's pretty cross-cultural with Mexican mythology too, Greek mythology with the three-headed dog. It seems before like, world religions, were you a good person, would a dog like you is a good judge of character, and that seems to exemplify in these myths. Um, but yeah, he takes you to meet the other gods, and Osiris is like kind of nasty towards people apparently. But Anubis is like your friend. And in the same way as in Mexican mythology, a dog takes you across into Mictlan or Mictlan. Um, like a dog is a psychopomp, and it takes you from this world to the next world kind of thing. So it's like a familiar, like dogs can kind of intermediate between the spirits and humans. And
takes you to
that's
the land of the dead.
yeah, in Mexican mythology and Egyptian. And then in Greek mythology, the three-headed dog, either depending on the story, it's like Hades's dog or whatever his name is, Pluto's dog, keeps you in the underworld or keeps people from getting in. Like he
Interesting.
doesn't he guards it. Yeah. So it's like dogs seem to in this our psyche have like this weird intermediary space between this world and the next or whatever. And that's a very common myth.
I wonder how
So
far back that goes.
I don't know. Dan Davis has a video on it, I think. Like it's an Indo-European mythology about dogs. Um,
Shout out Dan Davis, another great chap.
yeah, he's great. But with the domestication theories and the processes of that, and with Anubis, there's a lot of jackals in Egypt, which are wolves technically, but they scavenge tombs and stuff like that, which is where I think Anubis comes from.
Well,
And
okay, so they would hang around the dead.
the dead, yeah. And when you die, or I'm sorry, Anubis is the first to mummify somebody, whichever, I think it's Osiris. He gets chopped up into a million pieces by Set. And then Osiris is all sad, or Isis is sad, but whichever one it is, Anubis finds all the, no, actually, sorry. She's sad because his penis is gone. And then Anubis, being a dog, finds his penis and brings it back.
Nice.
And they put him back together.
Good dog.
But yeah, good dog. But he's the first to mummify somebody. So it's something to do with death. And I think that has to do with dogs scavenging bones or like graves and like you always coyotes are kind of associated with like death and spookiness. Um, but yeah, dogs have this like interesting whether it's from them scavenging our camps at first in our mind, they just scavenged bones and dead things,
Yeah.
so therefore they're associated with the dead. Super
Super,
cool.
super interesting.
That's a
Okay.
dissertation if someone wants it.
Real quick, you mentioned Romans as well. So by the
Yeah.
Roman era, what's the relationship with dogs?
Yeah. Have you been to Rome?
Yes.
Okay, if you've for anyone listening, if you've been to Rome, there's greyhound statues everywhere. Like there. And I was wondering, are greyhounds just easy to sculpt because they're kind of smooth haired and like kind of not hairless, but really short haired? Or what? And then I looked it up. Romans, like if you were rich, you could import a fancy Egyptian greyhound, or
Oh,
one from the Levant, and like it was a status symbol.
okay.
So you had that, but there were other little dogs too all over the place, like little Pomeranian type things. That there's tombs of them all over the place. There's little like epitaphs written to them. There's dogs at Pompeii.
And there are war dogs as well, right?
Yeah, I just had a guy on talking about this. The cane corso, but the original version of it was like the Molossian hound in Greece, and then in Rome it was the Canis pugnax, is what it's called. And that was like a centurion, like straight up war dog.
You wouldn't want to mess with one of
Um,
those guys.
I would not. No.
They would be kind of the
Um,
predecessors of the dogs that like Cortez had.
yeah, I'd
Would
imagine
that be
like
fair to say?
a Mediterranean war dog.
Would they have remind more or less the same since the Roman times?
That's
So
the
the
Spanish
type of
dogs.
dogs that Cortez, Columbus had, would they have remained kind of like that? Like, are they reminiscent of these Roman war dogs?
That's a good point because I know Alexander had the Molossian hound. They
Mm,
supposedly had one, and there's statues of it at the British Museum too. But yeah, I think so. And I know about the Spanish war dogs from the perspective of the Reconquista. They used dogs there with the Moors
yeah, yeah,
in their war there. So I'd imagine if they're like a Iberian dog, it'd be similar to the Roman ones they
yeah.
left.
I'm thinking they went to war under like the Greeks, and then they carried on at war for a long time,
Yeah, I
like
mean
over 1,000 years. Yeah,
it's what they're for,
a
and not
a
to.
lot of service for those guys.
I get asked a lot about dog behavior. I'm not a behaviorist or a vet, so I can't give it, advice. But it does seem that dogs like are most happy when they're doing their task that they're bred for.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like war dogs is part of that.
Mm.
So like, and when you think about like, I wouldn't want a dog going to war if it doesn't, I don't want it to get hurt. But like when you watch those like army Malinois doing their thing, like they love it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
uh,
Yep. Yep.
it just makes sense. People would have exploited it back then.
Yeah. Something about a job well done.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. It's been awesome talking to you, David Ian
Yeah, man,
Howe.
this was great.
Everybody check out his stuff. Go on his Instagram. You want to say anything real quick?
Yeah, Instagram's the biggest one, ethnosynology. And then everything else is David Ian Howe. You can find me through that too. I got two podcasts. They're both here on YouTube, also Spotify, Apple. And then, yeah, I'd love to have you on my show at some point. Talk more about history, nerd out.
Love to do that. We can carry on the conversation.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, this was a blast. I really like talking to
Nice
you.
one.